Alrighty, so yeah, Ben, we can start with hockey today, and then we can dive into some football afterwards.
Yeah, I think that's good. I was looking at the standings, so I know like the Jets they started off really hot, didn't they?
They
Um,
did, yeah. They were like NHL record, like 15-1, but they've fallen off, which is not like it's tough to keep that up.
yeah, I
Um,
see 4-5-1 over their last 10. Golden Knights are in first. Interesting. In
well,
the
the craziest part is the Washington Capitals.
Yeah, what's
So,
going on with that?
so I think there's two things that are going on. And we can look at the roster real quickly. So I built a new data space. I haven't published it to the community for all those that are out there, but I built a new one. Just because I was curious. There was, people chatting. It was one of my group chats, my buddies that cheer for the Flames, my local team, and they were talking about Mantha was in the Christmas photo for the Flames. They had their Christmas party this past weekend. And that's meaningful because he tore his MCL, he's out for the season. And so, I don't really know, how they handle that on a player by player basis. But a lot of times the players will go back to where they're from. He's from Quebec. So you would have expected him to go back. Now maybe that's changed where, if you're still under contract from the team, then they want you to be with the team and get your uh, uh, rehab and all that done with the team since you're under contract with them. He doesn't have a contract for next year, so that's why I was a little bit surprised that he was with the Flames. So we went in and I was like, it would be great if the Flames got Mantle back. I thought he was a great pickup, inexpensive. He's kind of one of these players that uh, is really big, looks really good in the ice, but struggles with consistency. He's kind of like the guy you want on your team if he can play 82 games, but unfortunately, Mantha can't figure it out for 82 games. So I was
Hmm.
making that comment and I created this data space. This is points per game increase year by year. So we've got our, 2024, 2023 points, point per game. And I actually was surprised to find out that he is actually lower in just barely in his points per game from last year. Close enough that you could pretty much say that he's performing at the same level. I thought that for the 13 games he played with the Flames, that he'd been a lot better. He scored 4 goals, all of them meaningful. So that was a bit surprising. Still think he'd be a great guy to bring back for next year for the Flames. So I kind of went very specific in one topic, built this data space comparing year by year, and so we can kind of zoom back out again and just look at the general population. Um, well, I've changed the layout here. Let me just add a couple things. So, you know, I'll quickly show everyone what I built. So I pulled in 2023 data, 2024 data, some player info just so we can kind of tie it all together. And then I built some calculated columns for points, so goals plus assists for this year, last year, time on ice per game played, because that's a big stat as we've talked about previously that I look at in the NHL. I think there's a strong correlation between how much a guy plays and how much he produces. And then points per game increase. So I'm just gonna add points per game increase, points per game each year. These will be at the end, and then we'll sort by it. Um, so the list of guys who've had dramatic increases this year for those fantasy folks out there after American Thanksgiving, which is kind of the sample that people normally use, is pretty crazy. So you got Macklin Celebrini. So Macklin Celebrini, number one overall pick, kind of has not gotten the same fanfare as Connor Bedard. But if you look at,
Yeah.
obviously he's got the greatest points per game increase.
Hmm.
Um, but he's pretty much sitting at a point per game. That's pretty impressive for an 18-year-old kid.
Yeah, that's actually insane.
Yeah. And then if you compare him to Bedard, we can actually pull up last year's stats for Bedard. Actually, it won't totally do it. We'll take a look and then. So you've got last year, Bedard is actually pretty good at 0.97. And even 0.839 is not bad for a 19-year-old. But to be almost at a point per game as an 18-year-old, pretty impressive.
So how easy is it? Because obviously I know I'm very loose and early in my hockey viewing here. I know the Sharks are not a great team.
Not good.
Um, because they just had the number one pick. I know they were really bad last year. So how easy is it? I don't want to say easy, that's not really the way to describe it, but in terms of like rebuilding your team, because I'm very familiar with, the NFL and the NBA is kind of its own thing in terms of, roster construction. But for when it comes to hockey, is it more like baseball, I would say? Like, I guess not though, because this kid's that good right away. Like baseball, you're drafting a kid, you might not see him for 2 or 3 years, I guess.
Yeah, I think these two particular players are in the level of like Sidney Crosby, Connor McDavid. Um, like if we go back and we'll look at Nico Hischier. Who else has been, Ryan Nugent Hopkins. Like these guys are good players. Um, Ryan Nugent Hopkins was at 0.827 as a veteran in the NHL. He's at 0.56 this year. Nico Hischier was at almost point per game last year, and but he's also been around for a while, plays in the Devils. They're pretty good now. So it just kind of shows you how good these young guys are compared to some past, I'd say, middling kind of first rounders. You look at what's out McKinnon, Nate McKinnon, too many Nathans. This is who they're aspiring to be. They're aspiring to be the Crosbys of the world, who is almost at a point per game and he's in his 30s. You've got McDavid who's at 1.5. You've got McKinnon who's at 1.5. They were both at pretty much 1.7 last year. Like this is who you want them to be. But to have them at the start of the year, at the start of their career, 18 years old is impressive. So I think they're a
Yeah.
little bit of an anomaly. You don't get that every year. And they'll probably fit more like in the superstar category compared to most. So to rebuild as an NHL hockey team, it's tough because you need 26 players. And if we look at, time on ice, Nate McKinnon and Connor McDavid, two of the best forwards in the world, they only play 23 minutes a game. So you need to find another, 40 minutes of play from other players who play that position. So it is very difficult for teams like the Sharks. And what the Sharks did is they tried to prolong their last legacy. And so they traded for William Karlsson. They auctioned off a whole bunch, and um, they didn't have a lot of in the pipeline. They didn't have a lot in terms of draft picks. So not only were they starting with nothing, they didn't really have any cash in the bank either to do much. Not like they had cash in the bank because they could spend money, but they didn't have a lot of assets to play with to start to kind of rebuild the process. So when
Right.
you're that's why like I'm not a huge believer in this concept of like tear it right down, like go all in and then tear it down right to the studs and then try to build back up because there's no guarantees and it could take you a long time. You could have Buffalo. Buffalo has been remarkably bad considering all the high draft picks they've had for a very long time. Let's look at their team.
Yeah, I don't know much, but all I know Buffalo's been bad like my entire my entire life.
Hey, it is remarkable how bad they are.
I remember I
Let's
was in like
look.
fourth grade and my friend was a big hockey guy and he was like, "You got to jump in on the Sabres, like they're gonna be good soon." And it's like
Yeah,
they've never been
yeah.
good.
Yeah, and that guy's graduated high school, has a job, and they're still bad. And it's tough because like if again you go and you look at it, like Tage Thompson, like he's one heck of a hockey player. He's a freak. He's that big, and he has skill. And he's nearly a point per game. Alex Tuck is a great hockey player. Was on the Misfits for the Knights when he was the young guy. Darlene, first overall pick, stud defenseman. Takes longer for them to develop, but he's going to be great. JJ Paterick, great hockey player. Zucker, you have a veteran. Another number one overall pick, Owen Power. He's going to be an absolute stud. Bowen Byron, supposed to be a stud. Ryan McLeod played for the Oilers. Dylan Cousins, great hockey player. Zach Benson made the NHL at 18. Jordan Greenway played on U.S. Hockey National. Like they've got Peyton Krebs, high draft pick. Jack Quinn, supposed to be good. Why are they bad? They've got two high potential goaltenders as well. In I can never get his name right, Piku Akulaka and Devin Levi. So they have done everything right in terms of stocking the cupboards. Yet I think they've lost something like 10 in a row.
Yeah, so I guess like so if you're gonna try and get better though, like you just said, the Sabres have had countless high picks and they've done somehow they're not good. So is it better to like do that model of like, okay, we might have a high pick for 3 years, but we're gonna hopefully hit on them and then we can improve our team, or is it better to kind of go the NBA route of like maybe let's make a trade. Like if we hit on a pick and we know we have a good player, like maybe let's try and make like some trades.
Yeah, they did a little bit of that. Like they went after Taylor Hall and brought him in after he won his NHL MVP, his Hart Trophy. Um, Here's the complexity of hockey is that the NBA is very linear and like you go get two players and then you're probably going to be able to find, three guys to be on the floor around them for most nights. And you only need 10 guys on your team. And you've got like how many schools, NCAA schools are, Div 1, highly, you know, great basketball players coming out of their school who never even make it to the NBA. So you got a much larger, I think, talent pool to draw from. So it's a little bit easier. Um, it's
Interesting.
kind of like it's a little bit like baseball in that, you have to have kind of all these things working. Like you could have great starting pitching, but if you don't have a bullpen, you can still lose a lot of games. The Jays, for example, not looking good. They've got a lot of problems because after the next couple of years, if Vladdy and Bo don't stay, supposedly Juan Soto said to them this year, what's the roster going to look like in 2026? And what is your pipeline going to look like? Like, what's your um, system look like? And the Jays couldn't answer either of those questions. So he was like, I'm out. Like, I don't even care if you can pay the same as the Mets, I'm out. Um, and so you kind of have to have all the ingredients or it doesn't work. Back to the Jays. Great pitching this past year. Fantastic pitching. All of a sudden they went to this analytical, batting system and no offense. Killed all the offense in all those players. Some of it too, they also brought in guys who had better team defense because they were tired of like Teoscar Hernandez, for example, like bobbling in the outfield, which I understand, but then you lose Teoscar Hernandez's bat.
Yeah,
So
dude, we'll have to
yeah,
do some because I'm a big baseball fan, so we'll have to do some baseball
yeah.
episodes of this in the future. I'm curious, so what's your thoughts on like the Juan Soto, that whole saga? Because I don't really think we've talked about it, I guess.
We haven't. I'll quickly say, I'm always coming from a Blue Jays perspective. They're, Canada's national team, and I just think it's a little bit of a farce that the Blue Jays think they're actually in it. And I
Yeah.
think I think they use them. They use the Jays as the same as they did with Shohei Ohtani as a false negotiating tactic. Because the reason why they brought in Shapiro and Atkins is because they built this, and you would know it better than anybody living in Ohio. They built
Hmm.
this system in Cleveland, and that's what they got rid of Alex Anthopoulos, who was fantastic, to bring in these two guys, and there's no system. And so all these players that are supposedly going to come here and sign for 15 years, they're like, why would I don't want to be
Yeah.
one player where you spend all your money on a brutal team for the next 10 years.
Well, I
So,
think that that's interesting because Toronto has like they have money to spend, I would say, right? Whereas Cleveland, they built this system in Cleveland because the Cleveland owners they don't want to spend money. It's a small market team. They don't want to spend money. So they have this down pat and they've continued this after Shapiro left, right? Like they still do it to a T. Every 3 to 4 years you saw they just were great this year. They weren't even supposed to be good. They had a rookie manager and they made won their playoff, went to the ALDS. They weren't even supposed to be good. They were picked to win 80 games. So like
yep,
they've continued that, but maybe like the system it works for them because they know how to do it because they only have a certain amount of dollars to spend and they have to do what they have to do. But like when you go to a different, I guess, team and it's probably just different. Like Toronto can spend more money than Cleveland, so
yep.
it's not an apples to apples. Like we're just going to do what we did there here. It's a different situation.
Well, you would think that you would have, because you have more resources, you'd be able to do more with it. You'd have more success because you're not constrained at all. These guys don't have to leave. You can actually keep them around. If you've got like one of the things that happens with a lot of baseball teams when you're in the small market is you build up all these great stars and then they leave. And if you look at Tampa Bay, they do a good job of getting assets back for those guys when they leave. The teams that like they know that it's like you're only gonna be here for 5 years, then you're gonna leave. So we're gonna get the most we can of the 5 years, and then we're gonna get the most for you when you leave. And it's just they know that.
When
And so
I don't know for sure. I think was it around like 2009-ish when Shapiro came there or how recent was it?
it would have been,
I'm trying
I
to
think,
remember.
2015, because they
Okay,
had their
okay. So,
last like
yeah.
Batista Encarnacion run in 2015.
Yeah, that was going to be my question because I thought it was like around when I was in high school. Um, so I was going to ask like were they involved with that? Because that was like the last time the Blue Jays were really good, I guess, when they
Yeah.
had that team.
I forget exactly. The I believe the president was retiring at that time. And so then they brought in Shapiro and then he brought in Atkins. And as a result of that, they were a package deal. There is no place for Alex Anthopoulos, who Alex Anthopoulos was getting calls from the Dodgers and Braves, and he was getting kind of bigger offers, and obviously went on to great things after that. Which might have been the that might have been the big mistake, is you had a guy who could build and you let him go. He had proved it, he'd done it, he was Canadian, he would
Yeah,
have stayed.
he's one of the best GMs in baseball, right? Like if
Yeah,
it's one thing if you have like a struggling team and then you bring in Mark Shapiro, like I think that's fine. But to get rid of Anthopoulos, like that is one of like you already have an elite GM. It's like, you don't need to make a move, I guess.
yeah. I think and they're a corporation, so they run like a corporation. So, you know, we're going to bring in this corporate guy who's going to be good in the boardroom, he's be good in the office tower, and then he's going to bring in his people. And the whole idea behind it is what they were selling was they're going to bring in the Cleveland talent pipeline system, and there's going to be this cupboard full of stocked players at all times. Plus, we'll all have this cash that you can keep them around, or you can go and augment the superstars, which I think would have worked if they had a stockpiled cupboard. Like, Shohei Ohtani might not have ever shown up, but Soto sounds like he was legitimately, he went there. There's pictures of him at a restaurant, like he was there, unless those were an old picture. So, and like they've made some mistakes. Like the Varsho trade, I was in favor of it in the beginning, but now you look back, it was like that didn't make any sense. He was playing 50% of the time as a catcher in Arizona. And then he's only played the outfield. He's great defensively, but his bat's only good as a catcher's bat. His bat's not good for an outfielder. So like I don't understand that trade. And then you gave away Gabriel Moreno because
Yeah.
mispronounce his name, who was like your next stud, who was a catcher who could bat because
Yeah,
they
and
chose
he went to a
Alejandro
world
Kirk.
he went to the World Series, right? Didn't he?
He
Was
did,
he was
yeah.
on that team that year they went to the World
He
Series?
was,
Yeah.
and he was one of the like unsung kind of heroes that, hit a bunch of key runs, produced offense, when it counted most. So, that's my view on Soto. Like, it's funny. One of my buddies who lives in New York, he's a Mets fan. Like he's really happy because, the Mets can't seem to figure out how to win. Like the last time they went and paid all this money for Scherzer, et cetera, who I'm a big Max fan. Mad Max, I think, is like one of the most competitive baseball players to ever exist. But they're kind of like Buffalo, where they like just can't figure it out, even though they have all the
Hmm.
things that you think you should need. So Soto might be different though. He's there for a long time. He's not going anywhere. He understands the state of the organization. There's no illusions.
That has to be too much money though, right? I mean, like okay, here's my only problem with it is that we know he's not good in the outfield. So, this is fine for 3, 4 years, but then you're just paying $55 million a year for a DH. I don't see how that is smart. And Juan Soto's I mean, he's a great player. He's one of the best hitters in baseball, but I don't understand like if anyone was getting 765, it's Ohtani. I don't understand, like I don't know. I don't know. The other
But
owners
even
have to be mad though. Like
well, they're definitely
they
pissed. Well,
have
they're
to be
pissed at
so mad.
Well, but you gotta like, and I don't think the Mets didn't do any deferred. Like they're paying it on
Correct. They're just
schedule.
paying it on.
Yeah. Whereas like you have to be mad at the Lakers, or so the Lakers, the Dodgers, because yes, this is allowed, but this breaks down the economics of baseball when you have all this deferred liability. And yeah, the Dodgers can do that, but then it creates an upper limit price for a guy like that, where not all these other organizations have this accounting leverage that they can play where they can push those payments off into the future. So like if I'm the other teams, I'm like next time around CBA or whatever, and we'll see because the big teams in baseball have so much power over the small ones. Um, I'm putting my hand up. I'm getting Cincinnati, I'm getting Tampa Bay. We're all getting together and we're gonna voice our concerns because you'll never be able to be competitive with with the companies that can defer liability like that.
Yeah, the Rays, their stadium got tore up. They're not going to be able to get a player for the next 3 years. They gotta build that stadium. That's where all their
They should
money's
move
gonna
back
go.
to Montreal. It would be smarter than to move back to Montreal, but
Yeah, that would be
or them
cool.
to move to Montreal. Yeah, because they weren't originally there. But um, yeah, but bringing it back to hockey, like like there's just so many factors to make an organization good. And we'll do a compare and contrast. So the Rangers right now are not good. But if you think about how quickly they were able to rebuild and you go down their player list, so Panarin, they, free agent signing, the Rangers can do that. Guys want to play in New York. Adam Fox, they stole him from the Flames because he didn't want to play in anywhere but, a big market. He's a good pick. He's fresh. Sabinajab, they stole from the Senators who were rebuilding. First overall pick, stole him from Florida. Good pick, ex-winner, and we're starting to get kind of, below the fold. Um, but what's really the difference between these two teams? One team, has a
Mhm.
legit chance of winning the Stanley Cup. Maybe not this year. They got to solve their coaching problem. And the Buffalo Sabres are perennially trash.
Who who would be your pick right now for the Stanley Cup? I'm looking at I pulled up the odds. So you basically have the Hurricanes and the Oilers as like co-favorites, and then Dallas, Florida, New Jersey. after that?
Let's look up. I went to Notre Dame, as I mentioned last time, in Saskatchewan, and Rod Brendamore went to Notre Dame, so he was always like a legend. But you look at Carolina. Um, they're a hockey team. They have like insane depth. They have insane like talent pipeline, insane system. And they don't have a big budget. Like they're not drawing people to go play in Carolina. They're going there because it's a good program, because Rod Brindamore runs a good program. But I like them. The problem that Carolina has run into is, they've had a lot of injuries. That's the other thing about hockey is you have to be able to outlast your opponent. You have to survive. And it's grueling. Like when you're playing every second night, the most physical hockey you've played in your entire life for 2 months, by the end of it, it's a war of attrition. It's like who's still left standing at the end. So I like Carolina. I'm not a huge fan of Edmonton because I think my view is who wins in the regular season? It's your top two lines. It's your best players. Who wins in the playoffs? It's the bottom half of your roster because everybody's got somebody good. Now you have Draisaitl and McDavid who are significantly better. They're two of the best players in the world. So they were able to ride them. They're able to change the course of the game throughout, but it's hard for them to do that for 2 whole months. And the rest of the Oilers, like they went out and they got old. We'll just put 50 guys up here. Um, they got Jeff Skinner from Buffalo. Why did you do that? $6 million, point four. You got rid of Dylan Holloway and Philip Broberg. You got Connor Brown just because he's friends with McDavid. He was actually pretty good in the playoffs, so you can't criticize him too much. I feel like where's he's not even on this list. It's like we're missing somebody. Because I thought they got Arvidsson.
Yeah, he's
Oh,
right
there he
there.
is.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You got Corey Perry, who's like 100. Adam Henrique, who's like 97 years old. And
Yeah, I
Victor
was gonna say
Arvidsson, who's
Adam Henrique
95.
I know is old because when I used to play, I remember him from when I used to play NHL DFS nightly, and that was like 2018, and I remember that guy.
Yeah. He played
2017.
he was just a young pup when he played on New Jersey, which was like 2 decades ago.
Yeah, actually, that was probably like 2015 I was doing that. So, yeah.
Yeah, they've got who's the others? They've got another old centerman too. Derek Ryan. So they've got Victor Arvidsson, Corey Perry, Adam Henrique, and Derek Ryan, who all have to be like 40. Like I just can't see that lasting, even though you've got
Yeah.
two of the best players in the world.
It's like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they did that when they got Brady. They just brought in all these old guys, and it worked that one year when they went to the Super Bowl and won. Like the Oilers went to the Super Bowl or the Stanley Cup last year, but then after that, it was just like you can't just rely on your top like few guys.
Yeah. Well, and they had a few good young guys. They had Ryan McLeod who got traded. They had and they had, a lot of this is for cap reasons. And they had uh Philip Broberg and Dylan Holloway, who were in that like salary range and age range and energy range. You need like two or three guys. If you go back and you look at teams that win the NHL, win the Stanley Cup, most of them they don't have a bad contract. If you look at a bad contract, Darnell Nurse for 9 million is not worth it. That's a bad contract. Most of them have young contributing players with energy and points and responsibly defensively at entry level contract level or their kind of bridge contract. And then the last thing is goaltending. Like you can't have you need a goalie that can make the saves that they should make. which I think the
Yeah,
Oilers have finally found that at least. And if you look at Carolina, that was one of the things that has hurt them because they've been injured. So then they have had goalies who just can't quite shut the door and make the saves that they need to make.
right. I feel like a lot of times, again, I watch, but not super in depth in the past. But I feel like when I see teams like win, the Stanley Cup and stuff, like they always have just this dominant goalie that catches fire in the playoffs, and you just like can't beat him.
Bobrovsky for
Hmm.
Florida. Like I think Florida's got a
Yeah,
chance to win again. Like they just rolled through Alberta. They played
yeah. I
Calgary and
was gonna ask
Edmonton.
about that. Yeah.
They came back and beat the Oilers last night where I think they were down 4-0 and they won 6-5. And the Flames beat them, but they've got a really good team. They've got a really, really good coach. I really like Paul Maurice, just his philosophy on life, I think really lends to attracting kind of the next generation of player, but also holding them accountable. Um, so I think they're going to be really good. I think the Dallas Stars are like extremely good. Um, just not responding. You're still there? Did I lose you?
No, I'm here. Yeah, I got you.
Okay. I don't know why it's frozen. Um, I was going to pull up the Stars, but uh, it's interesting. The Stars are extremely good. They've got a ton of talent, and their good players aren't even playing that well. Like Jason Robertson's been below average. Wyatt Johnson's been, medium. They're starting to heat up. But they're a team to look out for. And then Colorado is really good. Colorado has had absolutely terrible goaltending. They won with Darcy Kemper the one year where, he wasn't kind of a brand name goalie. And I think they were banking on finding another non-brand name goalie that could, you know, continue to make the save when they needed it. But they just haven't found it. And it's the perfect example. If you don't have that goaltender, doesn't matter how good you are. Doesn't matter if you've got Nate McKinnon, Cale Makar, Mikko Rantanen, you're not winning.
Right.
So yeah, the NHL is in a good place. They need to market their players better, but there's a lot of really good hockey players in the NHL right now.
Yeah, I was gonna say I've noticed that like the quality of player is very good,
Yeah, we've got the Four
especially at the
Nations
top
Cup
end.
coming up in a couple months, and that'll be really interesting. It'll be the first time that there's best on best in 9 years. First time Connor McDavid's played in professional best on best.
Wow,
Um,
that'll be cool.
yeah, so it's going to be really good. Canada is one of the favorites. U.S. team looks great. I think again, problem with Canada, Jordan Binnington's the best Canadian goalie right now, which is crazy because normally Canada we are known for having very good goaltending. Um, and so heading into that tournament, even though we got all these superstars, um, will Jordan Binnington be able to play well enough for them to win?
When does that start?
It's normally around, I think it's February.
Okay.
I forget exactly. I think it's 2 weeks long, like it's pretty short, but there's only four teams in it because of the conflict with Russia. They
Right, yeah.
they kept it so there's no, Czechia, Slovakia, any of those companies, just Finland, Sweden, Canada, US.
Interesting.
But yeah, it will be good. I don't know why nothing on my screen is can't even stop sharing. We won't even be able to end the meeting. We're just tough
It'll
to
just be a never ending. We'll
yeah.
do one of those mafia like Kaisen at the Mafia time. We'll just do one of those never ending live streams for like I'll just be live for a month straight.
Yeah. So this is completely random. Um there was a documentary called We Live in Public, and this is like at the advent of the internet, and some guy like built some networking company that got acquired and made hundreds of millions of dollars. And then so he started this art project where he bought a building in New York and then built a studio inside of it so that they were being live streamed the entire time. And then he brought in all these artists and people just to live inside this building 24 by 7. And essentially, it had no rules. So you can only imagine what happened. But for any of them has
Interesting.
not seen the documentary We Live in Public, I highly recommend it. I won't let you know. I won't tell you what happened. I won't, no spoilers.
Yeah, I'll have to look into that.